All right, questions for you. One of the questions I asked you to reflect on in your thought primer is this. What does it mean to say that something is dangerous? And maybe reflexively, we react to that question by saying, well, something's dangerous if it's harmful. Something's dangerous if it hurts people or if it hurts animals or hurts something. And we might take a step back a little bit if that's our initial response and say, well, wait a minute, is something that's dangerous necessarily harmful? So I have a container of bleach in my laundry room right now. Is it dangerous? Totally. Is it harmful? No, it's just sitting there in the bottle. So right away we see that something that's dangerous isn't necessarily harmful. And this distinction is important between dangerousness and harmfulness, because how we respond to things that are categorized as dangerous is likely to be different than how we respond to things that we've categorized as harmful. So for example, I think this bottle of bleach or this container of bleach in my laundry room is potentially harmful. It's dangerous. And so if I have small kids in my home, I'm likely to take proactive measures to mitigate that dangerousness, to protect them from that potential from harm by putting a safety cap on the bottle or putting it on a high shelf that's out of their reach. But if somebody comes in and they take a swig out of this bleach bottle, I'm not going to respond the same way. I'm not going to say, oh, you drank some bleach? Let me put the safety cap back on it and put it back up on the high shelf. No, now we're dealing with a totally different situation where it's not the potential for harm to exist. Harm now actually exists, and so my actions, my responses to the situation that fits into this category called harmfulness is going to be totally different than my reaction to something that fits into the category of dangerous. Now, for our purposes, for our discussions, the real issue is this, or the central issue is this. Can an idea be dangerous? And you can see here with this meme, the 19th century playwright Oscar Wilde and his take on this question. An idea that is not dangerous is unworthy of being called an idea at all. So he clearly believed that some ideas were dangerous and actually thought that dangerous attribute to some ideas is actually valuable or worthy. So we might be thinking about, we should start thinking about, well, what would be some ideas, examples of ideas that are dangerous? What would be some ideas that have the potential to cause harm? So an idea like this one sex is inferior or superior to another, or one race is inferior or superior to another. Is that a dangerous idea? Yeah, I think so. I think this idea has the potential to lead to harm. Similarly, an idea like having sexual relations with children is morally acceptable. Definitely a dangerous idea. Eating raw chicken is good for you. Definitely a dangerous idea, right? So none of these ideas in themselves is necessarily harmful, but they have the potential to lead to harm. And one thing you might consider is this, is that does a dangerous idea, does it have the same potential to lead to harm if nobody believes the idea? So I'm looking at these three ideas up on the screen here, and I don't believe any of them is true. So if I don't believe any of them is true, are they likely to lead to harm? And my answer would be, well, no. The actions that we take are expressions of the beliefs that we hold. So if I don't hold a particular belief to be true, then I'm not likely to act on that belief. We don't generally take action based on things we don't believe or things that we believe to be false. And so this raises another question for us, which is, okay, so I can see how some ideas might be dangerous and how we might mitigate, determine how dangerous those ideas are. Is it possible for an idea to be harmful? Not just dangerous, but harmful. And I asked you again in your thought primer, is this statement true or false? Either some ideas are harmful or no ideas are harmful. That statement's true, right? If some refers to at least one, then it has to be the case that at least one idea is harmful or no ideas are harmful. And so we might think about what the qualities of a harmful idea is, what the features are of an idea that in itself is harmful. And I've heard over the years folks suggest things like, well, if I believe I'm not worthy of love, that's harmful. It's sort of, it has this direct degrading impact. It has this direct impact that degrades my own sense of self-worth, right? If I go into a job interview believing wholeheartedly, I'm never going to get this job, I'm not good enough. Well, okay, we know that just holding that idea in your head has a deleterious effect on your psychological state. So clearly, it seems like maybe there's some ideas that can be harmful. And so the question for us that we're going to be reading about this week is, well, how do we deal with these dangerous ideas and how do we deal with harmful ideas? Right? So you've seen in our culture, there's a lot of conversation right now, really stupid conversation, but a lot of conversation about what kinds of things should be sayable in public and how do we confront people who are espousing ideas that we really find disgraceful, disgusting, right? So you get like the tiki torch white supremacists having all of their shouting about not being replaced and about different races and their relative values, really disgusting ideas. And you have people coming forward and saying, well, I know how to deal with that. We're just going to say, those are the kinds of things that you can't say. We're just simply not going to allow you to say ideas that we regard as dangerous. And people come off that a little bit and they'll say, well, I'm going to allow you to say these things or hear these things, but I'm going to give you an advanced warning. I'm going to give you a trigger warning, a heads up that the ideas that you're about to hear may be dangerous ideas. And so I'm going to give you a warning that you may be triggered by them. And interestingly, there's been mountains of research done on trigger warnings in the last, decade or so, 8 years, that indicates that trigger warnings actually have the exact opposite effect of of what they're intended to do. They're intended to reduce or mitigate the sense of danger that someone who's going to be on the receiving end of a quote-unquote dangerous idea is going to experience. And what the studies seem to show is that when you give somebody a trigger warning, their levels of anxiety and their perception of danger actually goes up rather than down. So it's an interesting phenomenon related to trigger warnings. The other thing we might do is we might just ban certain ideas from being said, period, right? Create these kinds of safe spaces where we say these kinds of topics are just not going to be said at all. We're not going to allow you to say these things and then condemn them, or say these things and then say you shouldn't have said that. We're simply not going to allow you to say these things at all. Now, interestingly, you can see here on the screen, this is a shot of our modules page for our course. And it looks a little different than what you're seeing as you work through this unit, because an earlier version of this video, the lecture that we're watching right now, had some examples of dangerous ideas that got flagged by YouTube, which hosts all of the videos for our course. And so I came into the course one day and I saw, oh my gosh, the video has been removed for violating YouTube's terms of service. And I thought, well, what the hell did I do now? And so I look at the email and it says, hi, John Johnston. We wanted to let you know our team reviewed your content and we think it violates our medical misinformation policy. We know you may not have realized this was a violation of our policy, so we're not applying a strike to your channel. However, we removed the following content from YouTube. Okay. So what was the dangerous idea? Well, I'm certainly not going to express that here because I don't want this video to get deleted again. But I will say it was about a topic that was all the rage for quite a few years. So I appealed to YouTube and I said, hey guys, recognize the irony here. I'm talking about ideas that have the potential to be dangerous and how to protect ourselves against those. And you've actually removed this content from my channel. So now I can't help students learn more about how to protect themselves from dangerous ideas. So please put it back up. Well, nope. We've reviewed your appeal for the following video, dangerous ideas. We've reviewed your content carefully and we've confirmed it violates our medical misinformation policy. We know this is probably disappointing news, but it's our job to make sure that YouTube is a safe place for all. Now, what's interesting, well, one of the things that's interesting is the ideas that I posited as potentially dangerous, as dangerous ideas in the previous version of this lecture, they turned out to be true. There were two ideas that are sort of captured by this image here. There were two ideas that I said, hey, some people regard this as a dangerous idea. YouTube certainly did, and YouTube removed those ideas. But now, those ideas that I claimed were regarded as dangerous by some are widely accepted as true. So the thing to think about is this, is if we try to create these spaces where some ideas are just simply not allowed to be expressed, how do we know that the ideas we're allowing to be expressed are actually true? And how do we know that the ideas we're prohibiting aren't also true? In other words, if we can't air our ideas, as bad and convoluted as they may be, how will we ever know whether or not those ideas are actually true if they're never given scrutiny, if they never have to pass any analysis, if they never have to be challenged? If we simply remove them from the conversation space, how are we going to know which ideas are good and which ones are bad? And who's going to decide which ideas are expressible and which ones aren't? Now, another way that folks have suggested that we respond to this idea of dangerous ideas is a really kind of interesting Orwellian idea, and that is to say that if an idea is harmful, then somebody expressing that idea is causing a kind of violence to somebody else. In other words, this speech is a kind of violence in that it harms somebody else. So therefore, the argument goes, an appropriate response to speech that is violence is violence. And my violent response back to you, when I punch a Nazi, for example, that act of violence is actually, they claim, a speech act, right? So you have this kind of weird kind of Orwellian changing of terms where speech becomes violence, and then violence is then, in response, is regarded as speech. You could kick it old school like me and say, well, I'm happy to run the risk of being harmed by a dangerous idea because I think that censoring or penalizing those who express ideas that I don't like is actually more dangerous than any single idea could be. And I think that it's important that we be able to engage with those dangerous ideas and be able to challenge them and be able to show others who may be seduced into believing these dangerous ideas, we want to show those others why there are good reasons for rejecting those ideas. Because if we just try to exclude those ideas from the public conversation space based on the fear that they're going to cause some sort of a harm, it's not like those ideas go unthought. They just go underground. And once they go underground, then we don't have the ability to challenge those ideas in the same way that we would if we said, bring your stupid ideas forward so that we can talk about them. And so maybe think about this, because this is going to be coming up for us in our readings about our hero Socrates, who, 2,000 years ago, over 2,000 years ago, was faced with this same situation where his fellow citizens in Athens came to the conclusion that Socrates was spreading dangerous and harmful ideas. And they had a particular way of dealing with him. And so as you're doing your reading about Socrates and his trial by his peers, a jury of his peers, be thinking about who the modern day Socrates might be and who might be espousing ideas in our conversation spaces that some people regard as dangerous ideas. And how do we deal with those dangerous ideas? What's the best way to deal with dangerous ideas?